François-Philippe Champagne is the Minister of Innovation, and he joins me now. Minister, thanks for taking the time.
Pleasure, and Happy New Year. I think it's still okay to say that. It's our first time on the show together.
Happy New Year. It's good to see you. I don't know if it's a happy day for your government. This decision from the federal court said you were wrong to invoke the Emergency Act, and the measures you used violated the Charter. Did your cabinet make a big mistake?
No, we did the right thing for the country. That's my opinion. Obviously, I respect the court process, and I think you've heard that the Government of Canada is going to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. But let's bring ourselves back to where we were at the time, where you had bridges that were closed, you had streets that were blocked. I would say the first responsibility of any cabinet, of any government, is to ensure the health and safety of its citizens and ensure the security. And if you recall at the time, there was a huge economic impact. I mean, jobs, 1,000 jobs were at stake at the time. So it's always easy to kind of look back, with the benefit of time and say, but remember at the time, David, no one really knew what would happen next.
Right.
And we had an obligation to restore order in the country. That's what I believe. And that's why we're going to be appealing to the Supreme Court of Canada.
But some of the examples that you've cited, for example, the Ambassador Bridge and the significant economic impact that would have, that was clear before the Emergencies Act was even invoked. And the other standoff in Coutts in Alberta, which is near the border, that was done through normal police work by the RCMP. If you can call anything normal under those circumstances. It wasn't because of the Emergencies Act. What the judge has found here is that really it was Ottawa that was out of control, and in their view, it didn't rise to the level of a national emergency.
Well, like I said, I respect, I have not had the benefit of reading the opinion. We were at the cabinet retreat. But what I would say, and folks who are watching us at home, understand that there's a time where government need to restore order. At the time, we did not know what would be unfolding after. And in light of the economic hardship, you may remember there was issue also with our partners in the United States about the fact that these key supply chains were being disrupted, that jobs, thousands of jobs were at stake. There's a time where I would think, reasonable Canadian would say there's a time where these things need to stop, that we need to restore order, and we need to ensure the health and safety of Canadians. And I say that not from any political perspective. This was the first time that the Act was invoked. Obviously, people are going to read the decision and learn from that for future government, if ever they ever have to use this Act. But I would say doing what's right for Canadians at the time, I stand by that.
Some of the measures like deputizing police officers from other jurisdictions more quickly, commandeering tow trucks, but the judge does take exception with freezing of bank accounts, freezing of credit cards, some of these things that were used as simply going too far. I mean, when you get that in a ruling, does it make you second guess or regret any of your choices?
Well, listen, like I said, my colleagues, I think a number of ministers have commented who had, and in all fairness, David, who had a chance to go more deeply into the decision. Like I said, I was at the cabinet retreat. But we're going to be appealing that, and we're going to be making our case to the Supreme Court of Canada. But I think fundamentally what I think Canadians and people watching at home tonight are looking and say, I think that there's a time where the government needed to act to stop what was ongoing in the country, to restore order, to restore stability and predictability, and restore our key supply chain. Remember, you mentioned the bridge, the Ambassador Bridge were blocked. I mean, and no one knew, David, now, let's go back at the time, no one knew what was coming next. So, I think in that case, you have to be prudent, and you need to have the tools to make sure that you can restore order.
Do you think a judgment like this may embolden the convoy, supporters of the convoy, people who oppose the vaccine measures that were brought in by your government to maybe take further action?
Certainly not, I hope, because in a way, what it says as well, there's we live in a democracy. People have the right to demonstrate peacefully. That's a fundamental right. Which has always been respected in Canada. So there's ways to do that. But the way to do that is not to block bridges. The way to do that is not to jeopardize thousands of jobs in the country. The way to do that is not to block key trading supply chain in the country. The way to do that is not to bring a full city to a halt. There's ways to demonstrate, and there's ways for people to make their voice heard.
The people on the other side of this argument would say that the way to restore order and keep order and preserve trade is not to violate the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is what has been found today by the federal court.
Like I said, this decision is going to be appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada, and we'll see what the Supreme Court of Canada has to say on that. But again, I just want to go back to, now it looks like a distant past for most folks who are watching at home tonight. But put yourself in the shoes that we were in that time, not knowing what was to come next. I think that the vast majority of Canadians would think there was a moment where we needed to restore order in this country.
So this was 2 years ago, pretty much to this month when it all started. And at the time, I remember your government was getting calls from the White House because of what was happening at the Ambassador Bridge.
Indeed.
Now,
it tells you about the seriousness and the need to act. I mean, I think Canadians watching at home, I can tell you from where I live, people, something needs to happen. The government had the responsibility to restore order. That's what we did.
Your party defends the Charter of Rights publicly, especially Arif Virani, your Justice Minister, has criticized premiers who have used the notwithstanding clause, for example, to override individual rights issues in the Charter. I mean, when you are found by a court to have violated the Charter of Rights and the use of this act, what does that do to the government's moral authority when you're criticizing other governments for what they do?
Like I said, this is not the final decision. I'm a lawyer, so this is still going to be appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada. Let's see what the Supreme Court of Canada has to say on that. We respect, obviously, the judicial process, but I would wait until we have a final ruling on that, which will come from the Supreme Court of Canada.